This is a presentation on the parts of a research paper, which could be your travail fi de grau or your doctoral thesis or indeed any research paper that you're drawing up. The basic parts in a scientific paper are usually as follows. This is a general model that can be adapted, okay? Obviously, the title, an abstract, a short summary of what's in your actual paper. The introduction. This is a bit that you write at the end when you know exactly what you've got and where the reader's going to go. Then you go back and write the introduction. You could also go back and revise the title, and indeed the abstract is a logical thing to write at the end. The place you want to start writing, once you've got some information available, is your literature review, which goes through the stuff that's been done, the research that's been done on your topic in the past. After that, you explain the methodology, that is, how you're going to do what you're going to do. Then you give the results, what you found, when you applied the methodology to your object of knowledge, whatever that may be. And then a discussion, making sense of the results, relating them, putting them into some kind of model, and then your conclusions, the takeaway, the stuff that people are going to learn from your research and use. And after that, your references. There it is, the basic model for a research paper, usually in the exact sciences, but I really think this kind of structure can be applied to any activity of producing knowledge. And that includes literary studies or cultural studies. There's no reason why that should be different. In all of that, you're going to require an assessment of what's been done before. You're going to have to think about how you produce knowledge, and you're going to have to present some findings and discuss them and summarize them so that people know what you're doing. So don't let me contradict anybody. Don't let me contradict your research supervisor or the person in charge of your travail fi de grau. You do what they say you have to do, okay? But if you're in doubt and you want a basic structure to follow, here it is. That's a good way to present research so that people can follow it. Let's briefly consider some of these parts. Some aspects I'll deal with in future videos. The abstract is usually just one paragraph which summarizes the entire paper. And abstracts are usually published separately in books of abstracts, or these days in online bibliographies, you'll have the abstract. Or you saw in Citave, you'll get the paper and you can cut out and put the abstract in there. So you know if you want to read it. It's like an advertisement. Hey folks, here's what's in this paper. This is why you might want to read it. It has several parts, and your reading in this course actually lists 4. I think there's a bit more going on than 4, but anyway. You say what your paper's about, what it's on, why someone should be interested. I think you should justify why anybody would pick on this particular topic, what you set out to do, what you aim to do when you started work on this, the instruments you use, that is your methodology, what you found, and what your conclusions are. So you can see the parts of it actually follow the structure we just saw. And the ones in red, those 4, are the ones you've got in the textbook that we're following, okay? Here's an abstract. It's a bit complicated, isn't it? It's of a paper I finished writing this year, and it's about, well, we'll break it up into those 4 parts, I think. That first part just explains what it's on. It's on the great Turkish leader, Ataturk, who said at some stage that there is no difference between the Johnnies and the Mehmets to us. Although I should explain perhaps that the Johnnies here were the Australian and New Zealand invaders who attacked in Gallipoli in the Ottoman Empire in the First World War and were massacred by the Turks, many of whom were killed as well. And the great Turkish leader afterwards said there's no difference between the people invading us and the people defending us, which is quite a thing to say. Anyway, that's as briefly as I could explain what I'm talking about, and I'm talking about this particular sentence. That's the first part. What's it about? Here I'm saying why anybody would be interested in it. Because people have contested it, that is, they said that Ataturk didn't say it. And when we look back on the debates about whether he said it or not, we find lots of nice cultural studies type things. Okay, so I'm giving you a list of the sort of things that people have talked about and mentioned and are involved in this. The phrase is on about, I think, I counted some 12 monuments all over the world, mainly Australia, New Zealand, and in Turkey, which is quite something if he didn't say it. Now I'm saying what I'm going to do that the other people haven't done. Nobody's looked at the role of languages and the actual role of translation in this particular object. So I'm going to bring some new methodologies to the table. And here is what I found. I find that we can justify it as a text, as a translation, and that we could even legitimize it, that is, say it's a good thing to say, in that it refers to human suffering as a basic humanistic trait, and that this kind of utterance can bring about resolution of conflicts. Okay, so those are the 4 parts in the abstract. It's just one paragraph, but it breaks up fairly nicely into those 4 parts. You can adapt that to suit your particular research paper. Just look at it for a minute at the verbs, the tenses being used in that abstract. The problem we're dealing with, texts always exist in the present tense. Okay, this text was produced, we don't really know, but it could have been in 1931, it could have been in 1935, it could have been in 1943, we don't really know, okay? Anyway, texts are always in the present tense. So the text claims that, all right? Even though Ataturk is a historical figure in the past, the text is in the present tense. Historical authorship has been contested. This is a present perfect, because I'm positioning myself as a researcher in relation to the previous debates about this text, have not considered. I'm talking again in the present perfect, myself, what I'm doing in relation to the previous, and then can find. I'm showing a possibility. So the dominant tense here is the present in its various modes. Simple present, present perfect, and here with the modal can find, what can be done, a realm of possibility. Abstracts are generally in the present tense, but you could just as easily have Ataturk said in 1931 that, if we knew that this was in fact what happened. Let's move on to the various parts. In the introduction, which as I said you write last, you should explain why you've chosen this topic. And I've put up a video there on topic selection, sort of arguing that you should be in some way involved in the topic, or you should at least give a good reason why anybody would be interested in the topic. You explain in broad terms what it's about, in the clearest possible terms, so people know what you're going to do. And then you say what you're going to do. Just present a small map of where this paper is going. Okay? And that could be as short as you like. Sometimes it's a historical object that's not, people don't know a great deal about it, and you have to explain a bit more background. But it doesn't have to be a long thing. The introduction should be clear above all. The literature review, which is your second part usually, sometimes you put in another historical chapter before that in a doctoral thesis. But sooner or later, you're going to have to just present what's been done prior to you. So short summaries of previous research. You can organize it any way you like. Usually it's in terms of topic, of the things that have been talked about, but you can also do it historically, chronologically, if that suits your particular field. In the literature review, you should only do a review of the literature. You should not make your personal criticisms or comments in there. There's plenty of space for that later in the paper. Here you just present what's been done. And the aim of it is to show that what's been done in the past is not what you're doing now, that there is some difference. And if there's no difference, then you make it very clear that you're replicating previous research, which is a legitimate thing to do in some cases. So you just outline what's been done, and you should conclude with a short statement of what has not yet been done. And so you're going to do it. Here's a section from a literature review. I've concocted it a bit. It's from a real paper, but I've changed things around, okay? I want you to look at the tenses here again in the literature review, okay? In the last decades of the 20th century, Horvitz's questionnaires on students' beliefs, and then you got the list, the references, you know how to do that now, attracted much attention, okay? Past tense, that's in the past. That happened in the past, okay? Since then, many such questionnaires have been administered. So here we've got a list of more recent research. That list can be as long as you like. And they have done research similar to what was done back in the past. Okay, and you just list them then. Now, in particular, Kern 1995 reports on. Okay, you say, well, Kern did this in 1995. And hey, that's how many years ago? 20 years ago. So it should be in the past tense. No. Kern 1995 is the name of a paper which was published, and the paper, the text exists in the present. Texts exist in the present. So reports on, okay, in the present tense. Where he claims that. The claim is made in the paper which is in the present, even though it was done in 1995. And then you got a citation that I could be in square brackets with a lowercase I, if you like, okay. It's good to see that at least 50% and you've got a citation within a citation, okay. Kern 1995-49, this is Chicago style, you know what that is now. And then emphasis mine, or italics mine, or italics ours, if you're writing in the plural, tells us what's going on with the citation. All right. Basically, the important thing is you can use the tenses that are normal, past tense for what happened in the past, have been considered to what affects your position now, but texts exist in the present tense. Okay. Let's move on to the methodology. In the methodology section, you should state clearly what you're going to do, or what you did, and you're reporting on something you've done in the paper, okay? So what you did in your research, you say, well, this is what I did. And I started off to answer, and you should really present there a simple research question. So in the case of my research on Ataturk, I really had two questions. Did he say it? I don't know. I did the research. I really don't know if he said it or not. And then, if he didn't, why is it on all these monuments around the world? Okay, so that became my, I started off trying to answer the first one. I found I couldn't. But my question then became the second one, which is more interesting, and I think I have some results for that. In the other project I'm talking about now, which is on the use of translation in foreign language learning, the question could be, what do language students think about translation? Very simple question to which we don't know the answer. The most important part of research is admitting you don't know, okay? And you go out and discover something. That question should become, ideally, for me, a hypothesis. Hypothesis is a simple affirmative statement. Okay, so that question there becomes the hypothesis. The sentence is a mistranslation by an Australian, which some people have said, and I set out to prove that this hypothesis is false. Okay, so I could have said the sentence is a good translation by an Australian, but I have problems with good. Okay, and then language students report more satisfaction from translation activities than their instructors do. That is, students like doing translations, but their teachers, their instructors, their university professors are less enthusiastic than they are. Interesting hypothesis. In the methodology, then you would outline, you'd say if you're applying a particular model or theory. I have an online video on models, or what I mean by models, and we might come back to that. But you could say, I'm using deconstruction here. I'm going to give a deconstructive reading of a particular text. Or you could say I'm doing quantitative research, I'm doing qualitative research. I'm applying communicative approach to language teaching, anything like that. Okay, and then you take on board a whole set of principles and ideas about your object of knowledge. Then you say what activities you're actually doing. You're probably, if you're doing literary studies or cultural studies, you're reading things, comparing things. Basically, comparison is what you do in many cases. Noting presences and absences and contradictions, that would all come under comparison. In some research, you're counting things. In other research, you're talking to people. In others, you're asking questions of people, okay, with questionnaires, etc. Then you state what tools or instruments. There could be questions that you use in order to evaluate particular texts. These are the things I want to know about the text, the literary texts, and I'm going to go through them and find data on these particular questions. If you're doing an interview, usually you have a set of questions that you want answered in the interview. Those would be structured interviews. Questionnaires, obviously, clear research instrument. And inventories of things. For example, if you're studying job satisfaction, you have a list of things that indicate how satisfied a person is with their job. And you go through that inventory and you attempt to get data for each item in it. And then you're going to say how you measure what you find. When you get your data, you apply these instruments, you get some numbers or you get some phrases and some language, and you're going to say how you're going to measure the results. Your research could be qualitative. I'm going to see what people said or what makes sense, like my research on Ataturk's supposed utterances. Qualitative could be quantitative. I could count how many students say they like translation, how many teachers say they like translation. Or I can use both. I can use a mixed method. I could say how many like it, how many don't like it, and then I could look at what they say about translation. So I could use a quantitative element and a qualitative element in the same piece of research. Okay, just make that clear in your methodology. Here's some, no, we're moving on to results, okay? In the results section, that's after the methodology, you state exactly what you found. Okay, none of your personal opinion, none of your explanations. Just here's what we found. Boom, 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 one after the other. So that anybody can see those results. Anybody can interpret them. You're going to interpret it later, but you present it so that anybody could interpret them. You can organize this, usually in terms of your research questions or hypotheses. You can use anything you like. It will be citations, tables, or figures. Figures are the pictures. Figures are graphs or charts. Tables are numbers or bits of language arranged in boxes. Okay? So you do not include your own. Here's a figure. You can see that's a bar chart, and it's got the name, figure 2, etc. The name under the name or somewhere around the figure, you should make it very clear exactly what you're measuring there. Okay, and here's a table tables are, in this case, are numbers, and you make it very clear what's been measured, okay? So percentages of responses by numbers of academic articles published. So here's the numbers of academic articles. People who worked, these are academics who worked as translators as a primary activity or secondary activity. Okay, so numbers are in tables, and if there's pictures, it's in figures. Good. How do you refer to them? You can say figure 6 shows the trend, blah, blah, blah. The trend can be seen in figure 6. You can use a passive, which is very popular in academic prose. As can be seen in figure 6, the trend has been increasing in recent years. Okay. The subject's replies were tabulated. See table 1. All right. In your reading, you'll find more examples of this. They actually say something like the graph in figure 6, which I think is terribly redundant. I think good academic writing keeps things as simple as possible. Let's move on to the discussion section. Now you're going to discuss what you found. Here you say, well, I thought this is what I would find. I've looked at the results, and my hypothesis holds, that is, it's justified, or it has been refuted. Or, most probably, it holds in some circumstances but not in others, and so I should rewrite a new hypothesis. You should try to explain why. Don't do that in the results, but here you're going to interpret the results to say why you didn't find exactly what you thought you would find. You can pick up interesting contradictions in the results and identify them and say, well, I don't know why, but here's where we have to think more. There should be more work done on this particular part there. And the conclusion, briefly state what you found as clearly as possible. Bear in mind, some people, a journalist, if you're lucky, might come across your research and will look at the abstract and go right to the end and read the conclusions. So you make the conclusions very clear and put it at the end, and don't assume that the person reading the conclusions has read everything that comes before it. Very often it's not the case. The conclusions could also be recommendations for future work or future research. You should state the limitations of your study. That is, things that didn't go as you expected, or you found you needed to ask more people, or you think you would have liked to have read more text, but you couldn't get hold of them, things like this. And then give any ideas for future research. As you know, in science, the conclusion that's always in every piece of research is that more research is needed. Otherwise, we would be out of business, wouldn't we? Quite apart from that, in most cases, we find that the testing of one hypothesis generates new hypotheses which have to be tested.